Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview. Jonathan Harrison here, joined again by Manny Lagos. Manny, we got a busy day. We got a lot to discuss across World Soccer, MLS, Minnesota United. So I guess let's just jump right in. Let's jump into the most pressing topic, and that's the U.S. men's national team. A disappointing loss last night, 1-0 to Uruguay, and they do not make it out of the group stage of Copa America. That's not a good sign for a team that is going to be hosting the World Cup coming up in 2 years. That's a very disappointing tournament for them, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's probably not on paper my most exciting time to kind of talk soccer and podcast in terms of trying to be positive, but
yeah,
I certainly try to be honest today and positive. Obviously our Loons discussions are going to be challenging as well because we're going through the thick of it as well. But no, it was tough waking up today. I mean, I think the only good thing I can say is we got the World Cup 2 years away. All of these moments are great learning moments. Unfortunately, I think this one is a tough pill that we've got a lot of work to do in the next 2 years to get ready to really feel like we're ready to compete at a home World Cup.
And on this question, I'm not asking your thoughts on Greg Berhalter's job, but I guess at this point, obviously certain things need to change if they're going to be successful at the World Cup coming up in 2 years. So what, I guess, is the biggest or the couple biggest changes for you that need to take place over the next couple of years for this team to, I guess, show the success that they've had at the CONCACAF Nations League, CONCACAF Gold Cup, and how do they make that a successful tournament coming up in 2 years' time?
Yeah, no, I like it, Jonathan. I'm going to answer probably a little bit cynically, but truthfully. Competing in other things besides CONCACAF and winning is going to be really important. You know, we can't just win CONCACAF and think that we're good enough. So I think that's a start. But it's certainly a big kind of moment for U.S. soccer to evaluate the tournament, evaluate the direction, evaluate what they can and can't control in terms of how we're going to present ourselves and plan for 2 years from now. And as a former coach, it's never easy. And I think these moments aren't easy for Greg and for U.S. soccer to figure out. So ultimately, my feeling with all of us are in this together in some sense. And I think, we can all put up our hand today and be honest. And ultimately, I actually really liked us playing a team like Uruguay because you had a lot of superstars in that field, but they tend to play with grit and hunger and unity in a way that we still, I think, need to strive for. So to me, it's just a really big moment for us being honest about where we are and where we need to go. That can talk about coaching staffs, that can talk about players. Ultimately, we're all in this together to make this culture environment better and more successful.
How do you, I guess, play in a tournament when you know your tournament's on the line? When you have, and I don't want to spend too much time on the negativity, but one of the biggest talking points in that game was the refereeing and how poor it was, to put it lightly. There was some very, very questionable calls made. So what's the best way to approach trying to keep level heads while your tournament's on the line? All the pressure's on you to kind of get a goal against a really tough team, but you're also playing against the referees in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I just think you can let any excuses creep into your head at all. Referees, opponent, weather. You got to be focused as an individual and a group for 90 minutes to fight and battle any of the circumstances. And so obviously, there's a reality that Bolivia was a very solid game. Panama was a disaster for us. We did not walk off the field with 1 or 3 points, which we had to do come high, hell water, 10 red cards, it doesn't matter. And then yesterday, because of that, we should have walked off the field with a win on our home soil against one of the better rostered teams I've seen in a long time anywhere in the world. But my expectation with this group is that we would have fought and found a way to do that regardless of circumstances. And it was some tough referee moments. There's no doubt. Yeah. So there's no doubt. It's one of those things where the world felt like it was against you when you have the yellow card play on moment. You had the Tyler Adams moment of getting the yellow card, and they have the offsides or not offsides. But again, I think I said it before. You create your own luck. You create your own bad luck. I actually thought for 45 minutes yesterday, I really liked the kind of energy, fight, aggressiveness, battling. I just don't think we're 90 minutes fit for that type of game yet, individually, collectively, mentally, emotionally, physically, technically. You can't just flip a switch and say, "Oh, I'm going to play like that."
Right.
So again, I think there's some nice recalibration, nice assessment, particularly against a team like Uruguay, as what our next 2 years of workload has to be like for us to hopefully, obviously, get out of the group, but make a run at a World Cup, which is, I think, the expectation of all of us at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple wake up calls for a couple teams, big teams in CONCACAF after Copa America. Mexico don't get out of the group stage either. There's clearly some there's some thinking and changes of plans going on across a couple of CONCACAF nations over the next couple years before the World Cup heads to
I mean,
these
you got
shores.
Jesse Marsh waking up today. It's just crazy, Like again, Canada's through. Pretty good opponent to get to the semis as well.
Ooh, Venezuela have absolutely impressed in this tournament.
Yeah, they have, but they're very beautiful. I mean, they're kind of a defending counterattack through rundown, so it's
Yeah.
it's not like they're playing. I would say like the big four in this tournament left are obviously Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, and Uruguay. So if you're not playing one of those four, you're in a pretty good space right now to get to the semis.
Yeah, absolutely. This should be a fun tournament. The knockout stages to watch. Another fun tournament. The Euro is going on. How about Jude Bellingham's bicycle kick goal for the game-saving goal in the dying moments of that game on, what was that, Sunday? That was just, you couldn't have timed that particular style of goal any better.
No, it was amazing. And again, they were very pedestrian all game. They were really
Mhm.
struggling, and we'll see if this gets them off the ground. They're a little bit like Canada here, where I think they've got a pathway here where they start playing some soccer. You could see them getting to the finals now. I think
Yeah.
Switzerland's a great run by Switzerland. They're playing awesome. But I also feel like this goal might have just got England going a little bit because they've really struggled to create chances. They have such great offensive players, but their tempo has been slow as being nice, just like walkable. And then that goal happens, which is such a cool thing about soccer. These individual moments of brilliance has them through, has them now, excited and hungry to see where they can go with it.
How about Diego Costa coming up with 3 penalty saves in a row to move Portugal on in penalty kicks? And just when you thought going into penalty kicks after Cristiano Ronaldo gets his blocked, just when you think Portugal is going to kind of bow out, all of a sudden Diego Costa comes up with 3 massive saves in penalty kicks.
Yeah, add that fourth with about the 116th minute of overtime, when Pepe lost the ball and he had the
Yeah,
player had the breakaway, Slovenian player, the breakaway, and the big time save. So um, that was a huge story of the game. He was unbelievable. I mean, he was just on fire from the end of the game to the shootout.
yeah, absolutely. I said this last week, this has been just a wild tournament and it keeps delivering more and more levels of craziness, chaoticness, wildness, and it just keeps delivering. And I've loved watching this tournament day in and day out. I'm sad that we're now down to games like what feels like every other day at this point. It's no longer every day of soccer, but we'll get through it. Should we dive into this Minnesota Portland match?
Um, Now let's talk about USA a little more. I honestly think the the moniker golden generation needs to go away.
Okay,
Whether
yeah.
it's internal, external. No, I mean I think I say that nicely. I think this is our best roster team we've ever had and have, and a majority of this group will represent us in the World Cup. Um, but I don't think they need to have such a weight on them, ultimately, because really at the end of the day, these guys are uh, really good players on good teams in Europe, and really I think for them to get to where they want with us, they really have to prepare as a group over the next 2 years to not be individuals of like superstars because they're not. They're just really really good players at some of the highest level teams in Europe. Representing our country. And I just think that flip hopefully will start to get us excited about them navigating how to manage tournaments, how to manage preparation, and how to become a team that, doesn't get knocked out of the group stage in 2 years.
I know obviously one of the criticisms of this more recent era is that they've struggled outside of CONCACAF teams, and they don't have really a whole lot of opportunities over the next year because you've got the Gold Cup coming up again next summer, so you can't really schedule those games next summer. So how do you really prepare this team with the lack of tournaments, lack of outside tournaments coming up, and a lack of ability to play some of these big teams to get ready for a World Cup stage when you don't have the opportunity to play the Uruguays, the Argentinas, the Netherlands, the Germanys of the world on a regular basis?
Yeah, it's a good question. Funny enough, my brain goes to Minnesota development when you ask me that question, because if the answer is always competition, then I'm not sure if I have the answer. So I would start by saying, well, this is what it is. Ultimately, yeah, we don't live in Europe. We don't live in South America. We live in the US, and CONCACAF is our home and our island. And that doesn't mean that we don't try to leave the island and play good games, or hopefully, it would have been nice to line up where next year was a Confederation Cup instead of
Yeah.
the Club World Cup and the Gold Cup. So in some ways, you're right. This is our last kind of big competition before the World Cup, essentially, and we're out, and we don't even get one or two extra games. But I think there's got to be more to it. Like I said, I really love soccer for so many different reasons, but watching Uruguay yesterday was really amazing. I mean, this was a team that didn't have quite as much to play for. Has superstars all over the field, but I didn't feel
Without their head coach.
yeah, without their head coach, I didn't feel any superstars on their team. I just felt, a bunch of guys navigating and fighting, battling together, solving problems, not always dominating. There's no doubt this was an even game. We had our chances, they had our chances. That first half, I thought we were probably a little bit the better side overall, and really won a lot of battles and hung with them. But I bring that up because I think it's got to be more than just the competition at this point if we want to really be serious about solving it. We got to find other ways in terms of whatever when we bring the group together, how are we training, what's their fitness like, what's their group interaction, what's the real tactics of making sure the guys are elevated to really specifically being structured within the best skill set of themselves, and not necessarily like the superstars all over the field. And again, it's not easy to do, but ultimately, like I said, I think we're gonna have to embrace a little bit of that. It might not come from just competition. And again, I brought up Minnesota because that's the same way we are here. We might have to create some internal competition because it's really hard to leave our island and go play outside of Minnesota or develop outside of Minnesota because we don't have another city close by. So, so I didn't give a full answer, but we got to roll up our sleeves and get to work.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to answer because it feels like there's a couple different ways to kind of battle or kind of climb up this mountain, and they've got a lot of options right now and not really a ton of answers at this point because it's all still very new. So we'll see what happens, and it'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, and again, listen, I'm not trying to sugarcoat. Today should be a day of reflection. Should be a day of emotional, even for me, a little bit like emotional energy coming through in the broadcast, because ultimately this was so unacceptable from where we are as a soccer country, to not to get out of a group with Bolivia and Panama and Uruguay in a major tournament is something that we just can't accept anymore. We have to put our hand up and say and reflect and say a lot has gone wrong for us to now be sitting here today talking about hosting Copa America with an opportunity to make a serious run and compete for a title, and we couldn't get out of arguably the easiest group in the tournament. That's a tough pill to swallow over there.
Yeah, absolutely is. It was a difficult game to watch, just a very frustrating game to watch from a U.S. men's national team fan. I'm sure all the listeners are agreeing and that they were frustrated and getting upset and angry watching that game, watching how things were playing out. I know there was some positives in how, as you said, how the team fought for 45 minutes, but it just felt like at the end of it, a very, very incredibly disappointing result and something that probably shouldn't have happened, definitely shouldn't have happened based on the talent level that's on this squad, that's in this talent, that's in the U.S. roster pool, and the group that you had in front of you. This should have been an easy group to get out of, and they didn't. So they have a lot of hard questions to answer over the next couple of weeks before getting ready for a World Cup in 2 years' time. So
yeah, and I hope the buildup of reflection. I really hope our group and our kind of, they're not young guys anymore. I hope
right.
they can take the discussion, the criticism, the kind of ideating of what we should do, and use it as not only motivation but also as like, hey, it's okay to be criticized. Like I said, I think that's important. I think they're at an important phase in their career where they're not young and up and coming. They're building into their prime of their careers. And I think this, how we react and how a lot of the meat of our roster reacts to this kind of failure, I think could lead to amazing success in 26, in all honesty. So, again, I told you I was going to flip it to glass half full eventually, and I got there.
Well, let's keep the positive going, because big announcement yesterday for the club. Robin Lod named an All-Star, absolutely deserving of the honor, and I know I'm excited to see him play along with some of the other stars in this league at the All-Star game coming up later in July in Columbus. Absolutely deserved after the season he's had.
Yeah. Anybody that hasn't seen the Twitter feed of him being announced by his family going out
Awesome.
and practice and having his daughter run out and give him the shirt, unbelievably cute, so cool. Like, just, it gives you chills. So deserved. I mean, again, I think his qualities on the field are there for everybody to see. Very few see maybe his day-to-day qualities as both a member of the club, how he approaches life and his family, and the combination of the two. It couldn't happen to a better person, and I think clearly they got it right in terms of a quality player this season in the league. You got somebody whose touches just influence the game.
Yeah.
He really is that good. Is that when he's out there and influencing the game with his touches, it just makes things happen.
And you've seen how the last couple of weeks, how teams have really focused on kind of trying to take him out of the offense and really stifling Minnesota's attack through taking Robin Lod out. And that just shows the importance that he's had for this club and what he's meant to this club after a year where he missed most of it due to an injury. So an incredible bounce back for Robin Lod. Excited to see him play in the All-Star game and absolutely deserving of the honor. Just because the Loons are away doesn't mean you have to watch the match from home. With Loons Watch Spots presented by Coors Light, you can find a piece of that Allianz Field atmosphere at some of your favorite Twin Cities locations. Check out the full list of locations and upcoming watch parties at MNUFC.com/Loons Watch Spots. Let's jump right into this Portland game. Switch of tactics to a 4-4-2 due to some departures in the midweek. It didn't seem like not enough center backs to play the 5-3-2 that we've seen over the past couple weeks. Kervin Arriaga, Victor Erickson out on transfers. We'll certainly miss them, and we'll see. We're excited to see what they do next. But a change of tactics for Minnesota. What's our overall thoughts on what seemed like a really good first half, or a really spirited first half, but then turned into a really, really tough second half?
Yeah, I just, the adversity of the thin roster, and just the challenges of the team right now are evident, and I think they're getting more exposed just because the soccer gods have decided to expose them. And I think this game is a good example of that. I mean, what a great start! What two great goals by Bongi and Sangbin, respectively. Some really good defending. You mentioned Moses coming in. I thought he was really lively and had a really good game, and tired in the second half, but he put it all out there. And really, it would have been nice to get to the half 2-0.
Yeah.
Again, so when we have all the adversity we're going through, and the thin lineup, and Wildy going out before it, we played well enough to get to 2-0, I felt like. Not to say they didn't have chances, not to say that we had to defend deep quite a bit. But that really, I think, shifted the momentum in the second half, which was really hard to solve. A Portland team that's hot and they came at us. I mean, we really did our best to withstand them, and again, getting a 2-0 lead in Portland's not easy. And it's certainly not easy to hold it when you have the thinnest roster as we have.
Yeah, the thin roster is really kind of starting to bite the team at a difficult moment, as they've had a number of games over the past couple of weeks. They've had a couple of 3-game weeks. They're in the midst of another one. And that's not the full, you can't really use that as the excuse for everything that's gone on, but it's certainly one of the circumstances as to why this poor run of form has happened. It's 1 win out of their last 7, I believe. It's just a difficult run of form. Though it could have been worse if Clint Irwin wasn't in net, and he stood on his head and stopped a number of huge shots. Jonathan Rodriguez had a poor night until he scored in the final minutes of the match, but Clint Irwin had an absolutely wonderful match, and something that I know he probably desperately wanted after a couple mistakes in the previous couple games.
Yeah, it's just nice to see. Listen, Clint's been a veteran pro goalkeeper in this league for a very long time. So people that know him know his qualities, know what he's done in his career, and certainly for him, it was nice to see him bounce back with a performance that really stood on his head, and at one point almost got us 3 points and almost got us a point. So
Yeah.
again, like I said, it was really nice to see him. I thought, also over the last couple of games, I think Bongi has become much more lively. So to me,
Mhm.
if we're kind of comparing to last year, I'd arguably say he's still been at a level last year that we're waiting to get to, but he seems like he's getting there much more the last couple of games. So that's really exciting. Sangbin and him scoring together, it's really fun to see those two, kind of alternate goals, and that's encouraging for sure. So, and again, like I said, we had our moments, but given the adversity right now, it's really tough to manage for 90 minutes where we are.
Was it just the thin roster and having to play so many games in a short amount of time span that led to what we saw in the second half happening? Because that felt like, I know you said momentum shifted when they got the penalty kick goal in stoppage time in the first half, and that was certainly part of it. But I feel like in the second half, you just saw the legs start to give out from some of these guys after a very tough run of games, a number of games over the past couple of days, and it's been obviously a difficult stretch, not having as deep of a roster as they had at the beginning of the season. It's starting to hurt them. Was that just it, or was there some tactical switches from Portland that allowed them to have so much of the ball and pile so much pressure on Minnesota in the second half?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you used the word momentum. I would probably use the word. It just limited the staff's ability to navigate the match tactically in the second half, because a 2-0 lead versus a 2-1 lead.
Yeah.
I kind of used to, when I coached, kind of looked at it sometimes in terms of like these 3 15-minute segments. And in my brain, I tried to think about how each of those 15-minute segments would play out, and what did I want to occur in each of those segments so I could see the game out, or I could go find a goal, or how I would do substitutions. And so again, when you're limited in with those substitutions, when you're limited with tactically how you can do things, the shift of momentum wasn't just like it's now 2-1. It's a shift for the coaching staff to be like, how do we manage these 45 minutes with guys who are tired, with guys who are injured, with guys on the bench? And so to me, it's obvious, but it would have been easier at 2-0. There's no doubt, to see that game out, even though, because I don't think we were going to go out and snap our fingers and just start dominating the ball, dominating possession, and score some goals. So it was a tough task. And, like I said, it hit harder because we got out to the lead and we couldn't hold it. But I also, looking over the last week of these games, we've created our bad luck. So we have to put our hand up and say we got to do better. But we've also had a lot of adversity that creates the luck we're having right now. And, certainly Portland exposed that. And on the flip side, they have offensively really found their rhythm. They took it to us when we were a little bit not our full strength.
Yeah, absolutely. That was an impressive display from Portland for sure. Another tough night. Before, I know we've got a bit of a shorter podcast for the listeners, so we won't spend too much time on this one. But before we move on to the preview segment, your final thoughts on Portland or the Portland loss to Portland.
Yeah, I just want to forget it. I'm not trying to say that in a bad way. No, I just,
Yeah,
it's been a tough run.
yeah, for sure.
The adversity's there. I think the club and the group are understand that. They're not trying to make excuses. We're trying to move on. Let's get going again. There's been some good moments of soccer here, and this is MLS. This is the dog days of summer. This is when you've got to roll up your sleeves and get ready for a really tough game, which we're about to segue into. I know, and that's it. Ultimately, let's remind ourselves, the some of the attacking prowess we had, particularly in that first half, was really fun to watch. Let's just get
Yeah.
that more consistent. Let's get ourselves more organized and compact and ready to play, 90 minutes of defense. And hopefully we'll start picking up the wins and like we were earlier in the year.
Yeah, quick turnaround to enable in order to forget that one. They'll host the Vancouver Whitecaps. We'll host the Vancouver Whitecaps coming up Wednesday night at Allianz Field, 7:30 p.m. kickoff, 7 p.m. pre-match show with Dan Terrar and myself. You can watch on 1500 ESPN. You can watch that on Apple TV. Let's jump into this one. 4-3 win for Vancouver last week or on Saturday against St. Louis City. They will be traveling from the West Coast, just like the Loons are, to this game, and this will be an interesting one for sure because both these teams are right in the same area of the Western Conference. Vancouver had a really hot start to the season, then fell off very quickly, and now it seems like they might be trying to restart again. But Brian White and Ryan Gauld are absolutely on fire. 9 goals for Ryan Gauld, 8 goals for Brian White this season. There's a lot to kind of break down with this team. And where do you want to start here with the Vancouver
Yeah,
Whitecaps?
I think you got to start with those two. You're right, Jonathan. Let's start with Brian White. American forward, tough, honest. We are going to have to be aware of his runs in the box. He's physical. At times his finishing comes and goes, but I would encourage anybody and everybody to go watch the finish that he had this weekend.
Yeah.
There'll be debate whether he actually tried to shoot it or not. I'm convinced he was trying to flick it over his head. He just flicked it over everybody's head. But it's one of the most watchable goals of the year. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, it's really that special. And he's somebody that I think, as an American, kind of like Duncan McGuire, there are these honest American forwards in the league right now that are doing pretty well, that give their team something because they battle, they fight. If you don't, really defend them like a good box defender would, they'll find the space to either find a head goal or create something. So Ryan Gould's a little bit different. Ryan Gould's got that left foot, and he's got some nice, clever touches. He can finish. He can pass. He can drift all over the field in dangerous spots. So he is certainly somebody that we're going to have to keep track of as well, a little bit more from a creative standpoint versus Brian White. But both of them are the engines of this team. There's no doubt. Their DNA is all over the field when they play, and they're pretty honest and tough to play against.
Yeah, another guy that the Loons will have to keep track of is a guy with the same kind of style that we talk about quite a bit on the show. Just that MLS veteran, just knows how to play game in and game out in this league, and Fafa Picault joining them this year after a season in Nashville. 4 goals, a handful of assists for Vancouver this season in about 865 minutes. He's an interesting player just because, like I said, he's one of those guys that we've mentioned a couple times. You need them on your roster to be a successful roster. These guys that just have been around the league a while and know how to manage it week in and week out.
Yeah, and I get a little smirk, Fafa. Obviously we've played against Fafa many years, not only just in MLS and our NASL days. So he's somebody that we have to be aware of, and we have to make sure we understand whether he's coming off the bench or when he's in the game. He has an ability to find dangerous moments, and making sure we're dealing with that vertical speed of his is massively important.
Yeah, absolutely. He'll be an interesting one to watch. This Vancouver team is going to be tough for sure, coming off of that 4-3 win, a game that they had to extend into extra time, into stoppage time to get the win over Vancouver or St. Louis, because St. Louis did score in stoppage time, but that goal from Fafa Picault in the 90th minute sealed the deal and made sure it was a win off of the back of Brian White's hat trick. An incredible result for them. It'll be an interesting match coming up on Wednesday, But then there's also another one coming up Sunday before we talk again at the LA Galaxy. This is going to be as difficult of a match as you'll find coming up this weekend, because the Galaxy are on a roll. They're near the top of the Western Conference. That's going to be an absolutely difficult team. And you saw them this weekend, didn't you?
Yeah, I did actually. You're right. I think it's a massive week for us, massive game tomorrow night in terms of just, reminding ourselves of the qualities we have to walk off the field with 3 points at home is going to be really important. But then we have to flip it right away, and we have to get ready for, what I just saw live this weekend is an outstanding Galaxy team.
Yeah.
They had a comprehensive win against San Jose. I was there live. The front three of Pansel and Peck and Joveljic were outstanding. Ricky Puig came off the bench and probably had his best minutes from a structure and impact standpoint of the year that I've seen this year. He was taking a little flack. The team was winning without him, and he kind of took a little flack about his defensive discipline. And I at least from my live vision, I saw a player that was hungry to prove people wrong a little bit, or prove them right, because he was much more structured. So fun game though, I think, from a challenge to deal with that kind of offensive output. If we do, I think it's a great matchup for us in terms of winning the midfield. Certainly with Bongi, Singbin, some of our attack, we can really get at them as well. So it's going to be fireworks. There's no doubt about it. And like I said, I think this is a Galaxy team that seems to have, improved over the last couple of years, where they this time of the year they've kind of dropped. They seem to be really pushing to rise up the Western Conference table.
Yeah, absolutely looking forward to that one. A big week, as you said, for the Loons game Wednesday night. You can watch that one on Apple TV. You can watch the game on Sunday night at LA Galaxy, 9:30 p.m. kickoff, a late one at that. So that one's at 9:30, also on MLS Season Pass. Excited for that one. Before we go, let's get some predictions quick. Let's start off with the one on July 4th, the big one on July 4th at the Rose Bowl, LA Galaxy, LAFC. If you want to call it El Trafico, you can. I'm just going to stick with my usual, calling it the LA Derby.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Galaxy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I like it. Even though LAFC, I guess both teams are in a bit of a run. So I think I'm going to go the opposite, though, just to play this game a little bit. I'm going LAFC, another big one at the Rose Bowl. Other Western Conference action we'll key in on here. Real Salt Lake, Houston, that one could be interesting coming up on Wednesday night. This game at Real Salt Lake coming off the bye this last weekend.
Yeah, now you're when you throw out predictions for Western Conference foes that have like impact, and I guess the Galaxy and LAFC are the same, my brain goes, oh, it should be a tie, because I want ties.
Yeah.
But ultimately, is this one at RSL or at Houston?
At RSL.
At RSL. And we got the Houston the following week. So I'm going to put on my Loons hat. I want an RSL win, so Houston's confidence is a little bit lower when we go there and play the following week.
I like it. I like the reasoning. I'm just thinking RSL just because they've been so good to watch this season, and Chicho Arango and the rest of their attack that has just been absolutely firing on all cylinders this season is going to be really difficult to stop, even if you are a Houston team that has had a pretty good, decent run of form lately. I'm going Real Salt Lake there. And then the final one, we will go to the Eastern Conference, Columbus, Nashville. That one's at Columbus tomorrow.
Columbus just won 5-1 in New England. I got Columbus. I got Columbus. Yeah.
Nashville's still struggling. I think that's going to be Columbus as well. Manny, good stuff from me today. We'll talk to you this time or next week sometime.
Next week. All right, John. Thank you. Cheers, you too. Happy 4th. Let's get after it. Couple wins here. Yep. Cheers.
We'll see you Wednesday night at Allianz Field. Loons fans, tune in to the radio broadcast, 7 p.m. pre-match show, 7:30 p.m. kickoff, 7:30 on MLS Season Pass. We'll talk to you right back here next week.